Hello guys, Mars Fremens here. So in last gameplay ability system video, we went over what is gameplay ability system and we went over basically the abilities itself. And so now I wanted to make this separate video about attributes since Gas Companion comes with, let's say, sprinting and health, and they are like clamped and they regenerate. But what if you want to add more stats? For example, I'm making survival game and I have a hunger and thirst, and they don't come out of the box with Gas Companion. So we're going to go over how to, for example, add these two stats. And once you can understand this, then you are going to be able to add any stats, any variables in your project. So let's just jump into it. So as before, just as a reminder what attributes are just basically variables that you would normally put in blueprints. Let's say you have a health, you have a hunger, you have a thirst, experience, ammo amount, and stuff like that. So you would normally just put into the float variable, but in Gas, we use attributes for that. So again, I just made basic project, the empty project, where I just enabled Gas plugin. Important thing that I mentioned in my previous video is start as the fresh empty blueprint project. If you already have C++ code, then you're going to need to add dependencies. It's not a big deal. You can look in the Gas documentation how to add them, but if you're really kind of like you're a brand new user and want to do as little as possible in C++ and don't want to go through the like troubleshooting and understanding what errors you're getting, then start blueprint project without any C++ in it, and then we're going to use their attribute wizard, which basically just going to set up your project to be C++ ready for Gas Companion. So we go to here. After you enable your plugin, you should see this Gas Companion here, and we're going to go here and create a new attribute class. So we're just going to call this core attribute set. That's what usually I like to use. You can give any name as you want. And you have to make at least one attribute set. So we're just going to add thirst. We're going to set default value to 100. Then we're going to add another one. We're going to add another variable max thirst. And that's going to be it. For this tutorial, we're just going to keep it simple. And we can later add another one in the next video where we're going to talk about effect. But currently, we're just going to have thirst and max thirst. And I'm going to just leave max thirst also to 100 default value. And we're just going to need to create a class. And now it's just going to go through, it's just going to set up your project to be C++ ready and just going to set up all the dependencies. Once it's going to be done, it's going to put this error about that it's not able to fail to compile. It's normal because your project currently is open and it's kind of like trying to do low coding. We're just going to put like no here. So this is your folder, and now we can see we have the compiler for your project. Yours can look a bit different because mostly everybody uses Visual Studio. I'm using JetBrainer's Writer, which I kind of recommend for you to use. In Visual Studio, usually when you get like small typo, it just gets like, 100 lines of, oh, this went wrong, and you have no idea like where the error came from. JetBrainer is very particular to pinpoint where the issue is, explaining it, and it's very easy to fix. So until I actually discovered Writer, I was terrified to use C++. Now, since I discovered it, I'm actually way easier to use it, and I kind of like feel way more comfortable to use C++ because it's easier to troubleshoot issues. But anyways, so we can open up that compiler. It's going to take a bit of time for it to load all the stuff in. So kind of you can just grab a coffee right now, and what you need to look for is just when here the run button going to turn green, then you can proceed with next stuff that we're going to do. So we can see it's kind of has done loading basic stuff. It's still loading some of the stuff, but I know in Visual Studio also I think it's like some kind of like identifier that it has loaded everything, but I haven't used Visual Studio, sorry, in a really long time because yeah, Even empty projects for me sometimes didn't compile, and I had no idea why. So just download the Writer. Writer website has a documentation how to set it up, and just use it from now on. Believe me, your life is going to be way much easier working with C++ in Unreal Engine. So first, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go to Game, Sources, so the gas tutorial or whatever name was for your project. And now we can see we have these two attribute sets that we made. Let's open up both codes. So, and if we go down here, we can see we have our thirst and our max thirst and max thirst. And if we go here, again, we have our parameters. But you see there's not much happening. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to introduce clamping, because for example, like usually in blueprints, what you would do is, let's say you're regenerating health and all that, you would all the time need to have some kind of branch that compares your thirst and max thirst, just making sure that your base stat doesn't go over the max stat, right? And for us not to constantly making these kind of branches and checks and all that, we can just do it very simply in a gas using attributes. And I'm just going to show you how to do it. So first we can start with that stat that we already made at thirst. So, and the cool thing is the author of the gas companion is actually already has put the code here, how to use it based on how he did with health. So we can see the first thing we need to do is so this called is whenever the attribute change. So for max attributes, we want to scale the current totals to the match the max value. So all we have to do is we're just gonna copy this, paste it here. Just gonna just remove these, and we're just gonna change from the health to the thirst. Thirst, and then here, thirst, max, thirst, and get thirst attribute. So we can see no errors. When we made a boo-boo, Writer immediately informs us that there's an issue here. And as I said, it's like way better than Visual Studio, where it just blows your whole screen with hundreds of errors, and it's just like small typo. So we're just gonna fix it here. And then for the next thing that we need to do, we just need to go here, and there's like two clamping situations. We're gonna use example number 2. Again, we just can copy this code right here, and we just go here. Again, just remove the commenting out, and we're just gonna change this to get thirst, set thirst, get, and max thirst. And that's it. Basically, your whole clamping thing and all that is done. So before we are moving to the Unreal Engine and testing it out, let's add hunger. So thing is about that attribute wizard is you can use it just basically one time, unless you're creating new attribute set classes, but it's not adding to your existing one. It doesn't work that way. So for example, if you already know from the beginning what kind of attributes you're gonna have, you can input there, and maybe you're never gonna need to touch this with you're just gonna need to do the clamping, but you're never gonna need to add new ones. But for example, in our situation, hey, we just added thirst, but we also wanted to add hunger, and we forgot to add it. We can do it ourselves. So all you need to do is really just go over each of these lines and just duplicate things. So for example, we have thirst and max thirst. So first thing what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to that age, which basically kind of like creates a variables, right? So it informs the engine that there's things exist, because otherwise if we can start with this one, we're gonna get errors, and it's gonna just be easier. First set it here that this is the variable we wanna use, and then we're gonna set the same one in here. So what we're gonna do is first we're just gonna copy this, right? And we're just gonna paste it. So currently we are getting errors because it's a duplicate, but there is no problem with that. So we're just gonna rename here to hunger. Here the same thing to hunger. And here hunger. Then we're gonna go here, we're gonna set max hunger. And again, renaming here to hunger. And here to hunger. Now we can see the error is cleared. And one thing we need to do here is now we need to set up rep, because on rep means that these variables are replicated. So cool thing about the gas and this whole setup is your variable is going to be replicated, so you don't need to stress if, for example, like if your health is changed, if other clients, other people in your game going to see that your health is changed and all that. So we are just right now setting up that we are replicating these values so everybody knows what your health is, what's your stamina, thirst, and all that is. So same thing, we're just gonna copy these and paste it right here, and we're just gonna again need to just rename this to hunger. So, and that's it. Don't worry about this warning. It's going to disappear in a second once we're getting a file. And now we can move here. And we're going to do this exactly the same thing. We just find a thirst right here. We can start with these, get lifetime replications parameters, and we're just going to copy. And we're just going to find, we just write hunger. And we can see it immediately finds hunger because we already defined them. See hunger, then that's basically it here. And then we just need to duplicate this on rep hunger. We're gonna rename this to hunger on max hunger, all max hunger, and then here we have a thirst. We're gonna rename this to hunger. And the last thing, so we can just double check that everything looks good. And again, if we can just compile it afterwards, and if we made some naming issues, it's gonna put out. And now we're just gonna do the same thing as we did there. We're just gonna clamp the values. So we're just gonna get max hunger attribute to for attribute for max change hunger. So we have added two new variables, hunger and max variables. So in this case, it's attribute, not variables. And we can make sure that gas knows about the max values and is going to be able to clamp it from the minimum to maximum value. And actually, kind of like the last thing before we compile it, what I usually like to use just search. Since we copied from the thirst, you can just write thirst, and we can see that I actually have left over here. Actually, this needs to be hunger. We're just gonna write hunger. Let's take a look. Let's double check if I made a mistake anywhere else. Here is another place. Hunger. And now it should be all right. So again, like always double check because there's a lot of places where you need to make naming. Looks good. You can always copy the code in, let's say, Notepad and just use replace there. But I kind of usually like this, and we're just gonna double check here. Thirst, and this stays as a hunger. And now we just can press play to compile it. And as you can see, it's actually very, very easy to add. And like, let's say if you have some variables that don't have a max value, let's say, you know, experience or something else like gold. For example, in your game you have gold, you don't have to add max value or clamp it to anything. You can just add, you know, the same as we add hunger or thirst, you can just add gold. This is really just few lines of code. And of course, as always, if you don't want to deal with this, you can just take your attribute set, both of these files, attribute set cpp and that age, drop it into ChatGPT or Grok or whatever you're using, DeepSeek, any of these AI stuff that you use, and you can just ask it to add, hey, add the max, add hunger to my thing and add max hunger and clamp it for me. And it's just gonna do it for you. So I kind of just showing this so you understand, because it's all, I think it's always good to understand what's happening under the hood so you can troubleshoot. But if you don't want to deal with it, then really you want to avoid any C++ part. You can really drop these two files in, you know, ChatGPT or Grok, and it's going to do work for you. And so everything compiled, which is awesome. So now it's time to test this if our new parameters work. So we're going to open up our third person character. So first thing is, what we're going to do is the same thing as the last time. I'm just going to reparent this to my modular character, so it automatically adds component. So we compile. And the same as before, we just need to create attribute set. So I usually like to make a folder ability. And then we're just going to create a folder attributes. And we're just going to go over, we need to create data table. And we're just going to find attributes, attribute metadata. And data table, core attributes. So we're just going to create a new, so in the row name, we need to put the name of the attribute that we're going to add. So the name for that attribute consists of, you get this name. So basically this attribute set name, what you have here is like core attribute set. I'm just going to copy it from here. So that's going to be row name, then dot, and then attribute that we use. We have like a hunger. We're just going to set the base value to 100, min value, max value to 100. Min value actually 0. So we're going to set min value to 0, max value to 100. Then we're going to set to max hunger. And we again base 100, minimum 0, max 100 for now. 100, yes. And then we added 2 more. So we had that thirst, base value 100, max value 100. And then we're gonna add dot max thirst, base value 100, max value 100. For example, we're gonna need to add this attribute set to our character. We go abilities, granted attributes. We're gonna find our core attribute set, and we're gonna find this one. Compile and save. And let's take a look if now our character has these attributes that we just made. So we just want to make sure that they're there. And one way how you can actually test it is, so in a console, we're just gonna write debug ability, and we're gonna choose the show debug ability system. We can choose this one. And this is kind of like the debug thing that comes with Gas Companion. It's pretty cool thing because I'm just gonna kind of like full screen it, and we can see it's like shows the stats of your character. But cool thing is we can see here the attributes. So we have thirst, max thirst, hunger, and max hunger. So it means that I have defined everything correctly. Everything is here with the currently base stats to 100. And we can, let's just say, we can add, we can modify them here to, let's say, base value of, let's give currently 20. Let's say give 20 hunger and 20 thirst. We're gonna save it, and then we're gonna go back here. We can again show that debug, and we can see that thirst is 20, hunger is 20, max thirst is 100, and max hunger is 100. And the question is, like, again, how we can modify these values, for example, in game. It's very easy. Let's set back these to 100. Just kind of for consistency, so, you know, I always like just set up 100 and then I can modify however I want. Cool thing, again, about Gas Companion is, so for example, if you grab this attribute, we can do like set attribute, and we see there's no such a thing as setting attribute, but what we can add is search for core, GSC core, and this is kind of like a core component from Gas Companion that gives a lot of cool functions, helper functions to help with your project. So we're gonna add this we can add this component, and we're just gonna drag it out, and we're gonna be set attribute. And now we can see we have a set attribute value. Oops. We're gonna put it here, and we're gonna find, let's say, we can see we have also the ones that already comes coded in, but we're just gonna, for example, modify thirst that we want thirst to be 20, right? Remember, in database, let's set 30, for example. Remember, in database, we set back thirst to 100. So, but here we are modifying the thirst should be 30. And if we go here, we can see the thirst is 30. And now we're gonna kind of like talk about a bit how these values actually work, and kind of like where you need to be careful when you modify them. So for example, like have thirst, I'm gonna set this to, for example, thirst to 200, and I'm gonna set this to 50. And if we go and check here, we can see actually that thirst is 100 and max thirst is 50. So we have went over, and actually thirst got capped to this max value here instead of this max value, right? But if we switch them into the places, we can see now our thirst is 200. So that's why we actually use effects to modify them. And actually with effects, I'm going to go more into next tutorial, but just to kind of like show you something, we're going to create a base stat of, let's say, I'm going to set the thirst to 10. And I'm just going to quickly create an effect. We're just going to create an effect. And where is it? We're going to go here, search for effects, gameplay effect, GA, and we're going to do add modifier. Let's say we're going to set it to infinite. We're going to add, where is the, what did we modify there? Thirst. Let's grab thirst, and we're gonna do override, and we can set it to, what do we have here? And we're gonna set it to 200, for example. We need to change this to instant. That's what we need. We're gonna do instant. We're gonna go here, and we're gonna add grant effects. And let's actually delete this, and let's modify it. Oops. Let's set the hunger, let's set the thirst to, let's say 10. And now, if we go here, we can see the thirst is 100, right? And if we increase the max thirst to, let's say we're gonna put like 150 and 150. And now we can see the thirst has capped. So that cap works perfectly with effects. That the stuff that we coded here make sure that things are not overgoing when we are using gameplay effects. When you are hard setting, then you need to be very, very careful because as you saw, there can be bugs. We can set actually our base health bigger than our max health, our thirst bigger than max thirst. Now so that's why you always actually want to modify all your stats using this one. The same thing we can modify, let's say, with this max thirst. Let's say we're going to put max thirst to 500. And now if we go here and we go here, we can see max thirst is now 500. So that's kind of like one of the important things. And we can, and kind of cool thing is, let's take a look. So our max thirst is 150. We set up our thirst to 10. So now we can test it out quickly if it's going to stop at 100, which is here max value, or it's going to stop at 150. What I can do is, let's do a regeneration. So has duration every second. We're going to add a thirst. So we're going to add 20 to our health. So basically, actually, this needs to be 0. This is 1. So period going to be 1. So we're just going to every second add 20 thirst. So we can go back and we can go here and we can see our thirst is updating. And it's going to cap at 150. So I know it's kind of like tricky a bit, but this is just something that kind of you need to be aware of. So this is kind of small thing, introduction to attributes, and kind of I wanted to just show that we can modify, we can hard code these values, but when you hard code, for example, at the beginning play, it's fine. For example, like, your certain characters, you want their base and max be different values, but at the runtime during the gameplay, if you're modifying some of the values, then always use the effects, because again, gameplay effects are, they don't ignore this code, and this is what we hard coded, and they always gonna look for the clamps and all that. And if you're putting there kind of like in your hard coded way, then we can see that we can overwrite and get bigger values than it is. But effects, we're gonna talk about them more in a separate video. I just kind of wanted to show quickly how we can modify the stats, potential thing that we need to be aware of, and that we're gonna use effects to modify these stats. That's what you actually need to do. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, like and subscribe, and see you in the next one. Bye!